Errol, Urvashi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So, we're talking about grocery stores and labeling and what we can read and some of the stuff that we have to kind of read between the lines sometimes. One of the things that we want to ask about first is what's going on with organic, because it used to mean one thing and now maybe we're kind of thinking that maybe it doesn't. So what are some of the challenges that have been fixed and what still needs improving with the organic label?
Errol, you want to start?
Sure. Well, organic's a huge percentage of our sales at Whole Foods Market. In the grocery department, we're at about 45%. So we know that's one of the most important things for our suppliers. We work with our suppliers to help them find organic ingredients to, make sure that it's cost effective and that they have enough quantity. And right now, for us, the biggest challenge with organic is actually supply. We're really tight on organic dairy products because of organic grain. I think the commodity markets have seen these cost fluctuations like that the last couple of years, and making sure that folks have organic integrity. One of the most important things for organic also is using non-GMO verification and GMO transparency as a bridge to organic. That once you actually start talking about the elimination of GMOs from your supply chain, that you're also looking at pesticides and fertilizers and all the other artificial inputs, and therefore using that as a way to engage suppliers to actually push towards organic.
Yeah, and I think, we at Consumer Reports have been rating labels for a long time. We rate the organic label, and we look to see how meaningful all the standards are. And we're always looking at the conventional baseline. What is most of the industry doing? And then how much value are these labels kind of adding over the conventional baseline? And are they verified labels? Is there some kind of accountability behind that? And organic still has all of that. It's a troubled label in that it's probably the most popular, and so it's under the most scrutiny in a lot of ways. But what's really interesting about organic is it's actually accountable to us, to the taxpayers, and it's an unusual program in that we can go twice a year and go watchdog it and make public comment to the USDA. So just a couple things from our perspective. There's a meeting coming up in Louisville, Kentucky at the end of October. It's the meeting of the National Organic Standards Board. And there's a couple of interesting things that are on deck. Organic aquaculture and what that's going to look like. We're going to be hearing an update from the USDA. We don't think things are headed in a great direction right now. Right now, the recommendations allow for the use of things like open net pens in the ocean where pollution can flush back and forth, and less than 100% organic feed. So those are the issues we're sort of watching and trying to prevent from happening. There's also just a couple little things. In October 2014, we've actually fixed a little loophole that allowed for streptomycin and tetracycline on organic apples and pears, and that will stop now in October of 2014. It was something that not a lot of people know about. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's good news.
Yeah.
Access to pasture.
Now it is.
Yeah, it's really good news. And so I guess I always say to people, you can't black and white organic. It's so many standards. It's about so many different things. There are things that need improvement, and there are things that are really sound about it. So it's important to kind of know that there's an entire constellation of things.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about sustainability, organic should be the point of entry. Organic shouldn't be the highest ideal. It should really be the starting point. And there's so many other things that suppliers are doing that really goes beyond organic.
Right.
And I think that we need to encourage those suppliers, one, by buying their product, by having them produce more, so that we are actually strengthening the organic standard. And from a market perspective, for instance, there's a seal called Biodynamic, which is third-party verified by the Demeter organization. And in a lot of ways, that's a deeper form of organics because it limits the scale of an operation. It's a closed-loop production system. All inputs have to be grown on the farm. It incorporates pollinators and animals as well as plants. And so I think one of the ways that we should strengthen organic is by pushing folks even further.
Okay. And I was talking with Errol a little bit earlier, and you are one tough customer when it comes to some of these labels, and we appreciate that because we don't know sometimes that we see in a lot of different places labels like organic, and then now what seems to be creeping up again, natural. Organic and natural seem to go hand in hand. So what's the deal with the organic and natural labeling? What does that mean? How do you compare those? Does that mean anything?
Well, we have some interesting survey data we just did in June, and we asked these questions just to see what consumers are kind of thinking out there. We can actually run national polls. We have a survey center and some great scientists that work there. And what we found is that about 60% of people are looking for the natural label. 30% of people confuse it for natural, and people think, the majority of people think natural means no artificial ingredients, no toxic pesticides, no GMOs, that animals maybe had space requirements or that they didn't need any drugs. It has absolutely nothing to do with any of those things, and there are very few standards behind natural, and there's no verification whatsoever. And our survey also showed that people expect comparable things out of organic and natural. So for us at Consumer Reports, as we try to drive policy in the right direction too, and try to educate consumers at the same time to sort of create informed market demand, what we know is that if we wanted to sort of create a new set of standards for natural, we'd start creating organic all over again. And that took 12 years to do. And that isn't even meeting all of consumer expectations. So we think we ought to focus on what organic means. We actually have a campaign to ban the natural label altogether because we think it's providing a lot of green noise in the marketplace.
Yeah.
It's undermining credible labels that are really trying to do the right thing. And our survey data shows that people are being misled by it, frankly.
Does that mean anything in the Whole Foods world when somebody says, hey, I got a natural product?
Yeah, any sort of claim we feel needs to be third-party verified by an independent organization. So for us, natural is this constellation. It's our core values. We sell the highest quality natural and organic foods, and that's been around for 25 years. Well, for us, it means that there's a couple hundred ingredients we don't allow in our stores, from azotocarbamide in breads, which is, I think Food Bay was calling yoga mat. In bread, which we've never allowed. Hydrogenated oils, artificial colors, artificial flavors, artificial preservatives like sodium metabisulfite and sodium benzoate. So for us, that's the baseline, right? And then any other kinds of claims like that, we're asking for additional level of verifications. For us, the biggest growth trend has been for non-GMO verification, where over the last 5 years, we've seen a 500% increase.
500%.
At least, yeah. And that was when we started tracking it, which is about 2009. So at this point, it's close to $1.2 billion in sales at Whole Foods Market. Well, that's because there's a third-party label with a very rigorous testing regimen. In addition, we're seeing a growth in grass-fed claims. And so there are organizations out there that are certifying if something actually is grass-fed or pasture-raised.
Okay.
And that's really important because there isn't a federal standard on that. And we're looking for somebody to say that's what this means, as opposed to sort of being grass-based, where it's an 80% of their diet as opposed to everything. We're seeing that with, let's talk about halal products. And so we've launched a lot of halal-certified products. Halal is verification for Muslim consumers that it meets their dietary standards. Well, there's different certification bodies for halal, likewise with kosher. So for us, it's really important that any of those claims have that backup, and that provides us that integrity.
Okay. So speaking of grass-fed and pasture-raised, that seems to be really a hot button. While we kind of organic, natural, kind of get it, sometimes confusing, the real hot button, real polarizing issue seems to be the animal welfare labels. So we now know that there's no national organization that certifies the grass-fed or pasture-raised. So what do those labels mean? What do the animal welfare labels mean?
Well, it is really confusing out there, and I think, just like how many smartphones keep coming out every year, we get a few more labels every year too. And so, look, I think credible labels that can compete with one another effectively in the marketplace will cause each other to get better over time. And that's what we're seeing in animal welfare and fair trade labels that are on the market. And there's really a lot of differences among them, and it's I have an infographic here, and I don't know if they can maybe zoom in for a minute, and it's on greenerchoices.org, but
where we can find this online at
greenerchoices.org. That's our website at Consumer Reports. We rate, like I said, all of these labels, and we know that people want to know more. So in animal welfare, we have all these different attributes. You've got animal byproducts in feed, prohibition on GMOs. You have crates and cages, continuous access to pasture, and then slaughter practices. There are so many things, even within an animal welfare program. Organic doesn't have a lot of them, incidentally. And so things like animal welfare approved or the GAP certification program that Whole Foods uses, which is a 5-step program, you can start to see how all these labels stack up against each other in these very discrete criteria. So if you care about slaughter, know that really there's only 2 labels that are really out there, 2 or 3 dealing with slaughter practices. And in fair trade, we've mostly gotten products from the Southern Hemisphere that are fair trade certified, like chocolate and bananas and maybe tangerines and clementines. But fair trade, of course, our farm workers are also underrepresented, and there's a number of fair trade programs starting in this country, AJP, EFI, and again, there's differences among them, but they're all adding value over the conventional baseline, so it's important to see what. There was an interesting news item this week with Purdue and their humane labeling, and they were sued by the Humane Society, and they are now removing the humane claim from their product. That was actually a claim that they got an optional verification from the USDA to actually come in and say, yeah, it's verified to what Purdue means it to be. But there are no
self-regulating
national
labeling.
That's right, and they were really subpar, and they were nowhere really over the conventional baseline. So it was, frankly, fraudulent on a lot of levels, and they've been asked to stop doing that. So the USDA hasn't defined humane. They ought to, but there's these private label programs that have, and that's important to know. And in grass-fed, there actually are some certifications. American Grass-Fed Association is a certifier that is third-party and has verification. And so there is a grass-fed certification that's out there, and animal welfare approved requires pasture. So it's important to know which of the animal welfare labels is addressing that feeding practice. And why care? I mean, grass is what animals like cows eat naturally. That's their natural diet. They don't eat corn.
Right. They don't eat corn, and not only is it good for the animal, but potentially much better for us, as we should know, for the earth, the soil, as we were hearing from Marty talking
Even
about.
There's a nutrient benefit.
We launched the Organic Valley grass milk about 2 years ago, which is the first nationally distributed 100% grass-fed organic milk, as most organic milk is about 80% grass-fed and about 20% corn and various other forage and silage. And the most important thing that they had to deal with was actually the animal welfare component and making sure the cows, especially in northern climates, had enough calories. And it actually took them a couple of years to develop the supply chain and the supply, the fluid milk supply, to actually launch it. So we put it on shelf, and I swear our customers were bathing in it. We were selling so much of it.
There's a few labels, few brands that I like.
And it's a non-homogenized cream top, and it looks like milk wants to be like. You know, it's a great milk. But you know, in terms of the animal welfare portion in the grocery department, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our suppliers to buy the trim from ranchers so that it raises the price of the whole animal. So these guys who are selling into the fresh case, and you're seeing their stuff at a step 1 or a step 2 or a step 4, that they actually have additional markets. And so we've launched frozen entrees with Evol. We've gotten some other products on shelf in the frozen set. And the latest thing is we're doing a pet food, the first ever humanely raised, pet food, as in we had to create a supply chain for the kibble, because most conventional kibble, the dry food in pets, is actually from concentrated animal feedlots from factory farms. And so what we're trying to do is create a supply chain from our own fresh meat suppliers. Anything that they're not using for the fresh case can be sold to this pet food manufacturer, which then comes back to Whole Foods for an exclusive pet food product that we're selling, which down the line will also be non-GMO verified.
So let's back up. When we talk about trim, this is the stuff that we normally will never see at the store. It never reaches the store. Is that what the stuff?
Not in the fresh case, but it's the stuff that'll end up in fajitas or hamburger meat or other things. And then there's other parts of the animal that'll end up in pet food.
Which is still perfectly edible, which is a conversation that we often have, that if you do choose to be a meat eater, that it's best that we actually eat the whole animal and not just go for the steaks, et cetera, or the ribs. And so
The most important thing for those ranchers is a PO, a purchase order. Because if you want them to change their behaviors, you have to encourage them by showing them that it's a viable business model, that they can grow, and they're going to talk to their neighbors and their friends and their family, and that's how you build out a supply chain. In fact, in organic milk, the most important aspect of that is that the Amish have come into organic milk, and they'll bring a whole community of farmers. So if you want to convert one Amish guy, one Amish farm, they're going to take their whole community with them. And that's how we've built out the organic milk supply over the last few years.
And one of the things that we featured on our food podcast, Chewing the Fat, was actually camel milk, organic camel milk that's available in some Whole Foods, which come from Amish farmers.
I think it's on the West Coast only.
Yes, exactly. So who knew? You can create very unlikely markets out of very unlikely products, but if the demand
At the end of the
there,
day, the customer has to vote for it. So if folks want it and it meets our quality standards, we will carry it.
That is terrific. That is terrific. So really quick, I know we could talk to you all day, but in the last few seconds here, what are some of the most important takeaways that we should read the labels? We know that you're third-party verified. What are some of the most important things that we should know when we leave here?
Well, you should know whether labels are verified and, do your homework. We provide all this information for free on greenerchoices.org so people can really get in there and look at how these labels stack up against your values, and you can also see what other people think based on surveys. Free range, no nitrates, those are other examples of labels that mislead. Free range doesn't guarantee they went outside in and of themselves. No nitrates may only mean a non-synthetic nitrate was used, but all the curing agents and the chemistry is the same. So natural is sort of our top of the heap of misleading labels, but there's other ones too that you don't want to get duped by, and you want to know which ones you can trust, so do your homework before you go out there.
The most important thing is transparency, and really quickly, just always question, and always scrutinize a label, and make sure that you're holding our suppliers to their highest possible standards.
Well, we could talk more about this all day, but thank you so much, Errol Schweizer, Urvashi Rangan, for joining us for this talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louisa. Thank you.